I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take Two. Have you heard about privilege blindness? Maybe not, because I just made that up right now for this video. Privileged people have no idea that they are privileged. And I know this firsthand because I had privilege, didn't know I had privilege until I lost that privilege and my life fell off a cliff. I'm Jenny. Welcome to Life Take Two. I know there's a lot of great stuff out there on YouTube. I always appreciate you stopping on one of my videos. Yesterday, I sat down with the amazing Beau Grant. She is one of my favorite TikTok creators, and we talked about Ballerina Farm and how that everything that you see on screen is not exactly the reality of what's behind the cameras. No sooner did I publish that video than the elusive Hannah posted a very personal video talking to her audience, which, if you don't follow Ballerina Farm, this is something that Hannah almost never does. She especially doesn't respond to criticism or trends or anything going on. So this was fairly extraordinary, and I personally couldn't believe what I was seeing. And in her video, she addressed some of the things that Beau and I talked about in our video. I will drop that link to the video that I put up yesterday in the description so you can watch that. So today I'm going to do a response video for you of that video that Hannah just dropped on Ballerina Farm. But first, we have to talk about this whole privilege blindness thing, because I don't hear anyone really addressing it. And it's a really important component of class warfare that fuels a lot of the conflict between the working class and the upper 1%. Because throughout Hannah's video, we are going to see a huge amount of privilege blindness. And I know about this firsthand only because I lived a privileged life. And then, as you know, life take two. That didn't work out. I lost the husband and the money and the family and my health and my home and my vehicles, my dog and my shoes and literally everything that I owned in life. My Mormon family decided to shun me, which meant that I was just a single woman with no resources and nothing. And it was only while I was homeless, sleeping in my car, that those blinders came off and I could finally see the privilege that I had existed in. First, we're going to start with the definition of privilege. Privilege is the invisible, unearned advantage that wealthy people carry into every part of their lives. Advantages they often don't recognize because they've never had to live without them. It's the safety net beneath every risk they take, the open doors they don't realize were open for them, and the barriers they never had to confront or even notice. In the context of rich people, privilege includes inherited or accumulated wealth that shields them from the consequences of failure, access to elite networks, from family connections to social capital that translate into opportunities others will never be offered, freedom from scarcity, meaning they can choose simplicity or perform poverty without ever experiencing the terror of actually being poor, the ability to rebrand luxury as authenticity because their basic needs, housing, medical care, food stability, are never in question, a distorted relationship to work where the hardest labor is outsourced, hidden, or aestheticized for the sake of an online persona. When wealthy influencers like Ballerina Farm cosplay the hardships of working class life, they are weaponizing privilege, using the comfort of their safety net to sell an image of grit and struggle they have never lived. Now, when I think of privilege, the first person that comes to mind, obviously, is Marie Antoinette and Let Them Eat Cake. I went through a big Marie Antoinette era when I was in my teen years and collected Marie Antoinette stationery and stickers and artwork and things like that because the French court was just so fun. Marie Antoinette is the perfect example of privilege because being born royal, she genuinely didn't have any idea what regular life was like. So when she had her little Hamlet constructed and started having cotton gowns made for herself and her court so she could go hang out and pretend like she was a peasant, her faux peasant life was nothing like the real life of a peasant. But she didn't know that because privilege blindness. Let me give you a couple examples from my own life before I get into the response to Ballerina Farm here. As an adult, my ex-husband and I, because of our family and connections and the Mormon community that we operated in. I had all of these layers of privilege that, although I grew up very poor, allowed me and my ex-husband to generate a lot of revenue and live a really comfortable life. So my kids were born into a very luxurious lifestyle. When my first son turned 10, we asked him what he wanted to do for his birthday party, and he wanted to go from Arizona to Telluride, Colorado for a week-long ski trip. So no problem. We're there to make his wishes come true. My ex-husband rented a luxurious ski-in, ski-out resort for him and my son, and they went and dropped thousands of dollars. They ate his birthday dinner at this restaurant up at the top of the mountain peaks. They had to take this gondola up to the very top. This restaurant was like $100 a plate plus. And plus we bought him all kinds of ski gear and stuff, like his cute little coat and whatever. So my son comes home from his birthday getaway, and then one of his friends has a birthday party, which is just like a party at the park. And they eat a Walmart cake and they shoot Nerf guns. And my son was shocked. He was like, "This is horrible, this poor kid." He was completely blind to the privilege that he had. At some point, he had a new scout leader who was in our Mormon ward, but she lived outside of our country club neighborhood. We lived behind the gates in these fancy homes, in these private enclaves with a country club and a golf course and all that. And this new cub den leader lived in just a normal little neighborhood with tract homes, right? And the very first time that I took him to his very first cub den meeting at her house, in this little teeny ranch house, and it didn't have a courtyard. Like, we had a big courtyard with a gate and everything, like as part of our home. So that's what he was used to, right? We get to her house. It's this little teeny ranch house, and it's just a little walkway up and then a front door. And my son is looking around and he's like, "What is this? What is this place?" And I said, "This is your den mom's house. This is where your den meetings are now." And she opens the door and my son is like, "This is a house?" And he walks in and he's like, "Is there a downstairs? Is there an upstairs? Is there a theater room? Do you have a basketball court?" He had literally never seen a normal house because our entire community was so privileged. Before my Mormon family disowned me, one day I had my aunt and uncle over for dinner, and I had this Guy Fieri sauce that I put on everything, this chipotle sauce, and my uncle loved it, and he asked where I got it, and I said, "Walmart." And he laughs, and he's like, "Oh, then I guess I can have you buy some for me because I've never been to Walmart." And my architect uncle told me that it was a goal of his to go his entire life without ever going to Walmart. That's privilege. He doesn't have to go to Walmart. My uncle would tell you that he has pulled himself up by his bootstraps and that he's a really hardworking man. But what he doesn't realize is that just the fact that his parents were educated and that they were able to pass down that generational support to help him go to college and get his PhD in architecture, just being a good-looking, well-educated guy who had a stay-at-home mom that was there to take him to different activities and teach him leadership skills and cook him healthy food, and the fact that he had medical insurance and that somebody paid for braces. All of those things contribute to the privilege that allows him not to have to go into Walmart. But he would never consider himself privileged, and I would have never considered myself privileged. And Hannah has no idea how privileged she is. She's going to see in this video that Rich Daddy didn't help fund anything. But Daniel grew up in this house right here. And let me tell you, this lifestyle and the education and the support and the opportunities and the leadership skills that he learned, this is a deeply privileged life. And Hannah herself, Juilliard isn't cheap. She downplays her own life and her own family and her own childhood. My mom and dad were just poor florists, and she might have felt like that. But she also grew up in a really nice home. Every single one of Hannah's siblings is not just a little bit rich, but rich AF. This is her brother's house that burned down. I actually saw the charred ruins of this home when I was in Utah a couple of years ago. They're all incredibly successful business owners who are rich as fuck. Hannah lives in one of the most expensive zip codes in Utah. She is just minutes away from world-class amenities in Park City. She's a short half-an-hour drive from Salt Lake City. And so people are frustrated with Hannah because she's detached. And she is detached because she has privilege blindness. Let's hear from Hannah.
So Okay, I wanted to do a little video. So I've been on social media for about 8 years now. That's when we started our Ballerina Farm Instagram account. And I used to share so much about the beginning days of Ballerina Farm and us trying to start our business. And I didn't really worry a lot about what I posted because there was very few following at that point. And
I think it's important to share a little bit of the timeline in Hannah's life when they started that original Ballerina Farm, which is not the farm that they're on today. The original farm burned down in a wildfire. I'm not sure if they got insurance money or something from that, but somehow they got out of that farm, sold it, got the insurance money as that wildfire destroyed everything. And then they purchased the Ballerina Farm that we know today that's on camera. So Hannah and Daniel met in New York when Hannah was still at Juilliard's, and they got married. They graduated with one baby, and then they moved to Brazil. Why did they move to Brazil? Because David Neeleman had started that company and gave Daniel a job. Now, this is one of the first bits of privilege that eventually feeds into what becomes Ballerina Farm, because it's not every guy in the world who ends up with a $400,000+ salary working for his multi-millionaire dad's company in Brazil right after his Mormon mission as a newlywed with a young wife and a growing family. When my son came home from his mission, he was selling Verizon door to door and living in my sister's basement. My nephew came home from his mission and got a job as a busser at a table, lived at home. So that's the little seed of privilege that will eventually turn into the money that they need for Ballerina Farm. So what were they doing in Brazil? Hannah says that she was teaching dance and also sometimes performing, and Daniel was working full-time for his dad's company.
it was also just a really beautiful time in Daniel and I's life. It was so exciting. I felt like we were jumping into new, uncharted territory and kind of leaving our old lives behind and starting something very exciting to both of us.
I think it's interesting that she says that because, yes, they are kind of leaving their lives behind. Daniel grew up on the West Coast. By the way, why did they end up in Brazil? Because Daniel's grandpa had been a reporter and he had spent some time down in Brazil for a newspaper outlet in Brazil. And then David Neeleman went on his mission to Brazil. So it's kind of a home away from home for the Neeleman family. That's why David Neeleman has Azure Air out of Brazil. Now, they are not Brazilian, they are of Dutch descendancy, but because of those connections, because of the mission and dad working down there, their family just loves Brazil. Another really interesting thing is that Hannah has always been trying to influence. As a newlywed, she started a little blog called We Took the Train, where she was writing about her life, and she posted about how she was trying to share motherhood and her life and her Mormon faith with the world. So she jumped from that little blog, We Took the Train, to Instagram when they bought the farm. Now, when they first bought that farm, they were living in an apartment in town and Daniel was working. And then in the evenings, they'd go out and work that farm because there was no home on that original Ballerina Farm. It's kind of funny that she says that they started this whole new life because, yes, they never had animals before. And yes, neither of them ever lived on a farm. But after living in New York and then Brazil, they were actually moving just a short drive away from where Hannah grew up, which is one of the reasons why her mom comes out to the farm so much and takes care of the kids. All of her siblings are around there. Everybody's in Utah. Her brother and sister-in-law were building a home in Midway, just like 20 minutes away. Everybody is right there. So by moving to Camas and buying this little piece of property, this wasn't like they were giving up their whole lives. Hannah sells herself as this New York Juilliard ballerina. And yeah, she went to Juilliard, but Ballerina Farm is literally just a short drive away from where she grew up. She came back home. She's not a New Yorker.
Our old lives behind and starting something very exciting to both of us, which was farm life and homesteading. But I've always just loved this excitement that comes with doing new things and things that are unpaved in a sense. And so it was the same thing when Daniel and I got married. We we got married, and obviously, I started teaching at the university. I was a dance teacher, also dancing a little bit. Daniel was just finishing his degree. Both of us were like, you know what, let's start a business together. And I think Daniel and I both were fueled by farming and homesteading.
The reason they were fueled by farming, Hannah's talked about this in interviews, especially around the Mrs. American pageant. She talks extensively about how they became farmers while they were down in Brazil, accumulating the $6 million in published wealth that Daniel had when they came back to America, came back to Utah, and purchased the original Ballerina Farm. Anyway, they're down there in Brazil working, and on the weekends, they would drive around Brazil. They fell in love with all of the cattle ranches, so they fell in love with the idea of farming while working for multimillionaire daddy's startup company with a posh salary down in Brazil.
Was really craving this more holistic lifestyle. Daniel has always loved livestock since a very young age, even though he had absolutely zero background in it. But together we were like, let's jump into this. And
they had zero background in it. That part cracked me up. They didn't have chickens and pigs in the backyard of that mansion. Like, oh my God, I'm so shocked. On the topic of the privilege blindness here, a lot of us crave a holistic lifestyle. A lot of us wish that we could just pull lettuce out of our gardens, but we don't have the privilege to buy a $3 million farm and make that happen. We're working our asses off just to keep up and buy our groceries at Walmart. Privilege gives you the ability to crave something and then get it.
Video. So I've been on social media for about 8 years now. That's when we started our Ballerina Farm Instagram account. Also dancing a little bit. Daniel was just finishing his degree. Both of us were like, you know what, let's start a business together. And I think Daniel and I both were fueled by farming and homesteading. I was really craving this more holistic lifestyle. Daniel has always loved livestock since a very young age, even though he had absolutely zero background in it. But together we were like, let's jump into this. And it was very exciting for us. But we started really at ground zero. And I think it was a shock to everyone around us that we were.
So ground zero for most people literally means you have nothing. A lot of my family are farmers, and Kevin comes from a family where everybody is still currently farming right now in Idaho, right? So when we go home to visit Kevin's parents, most of his aunts and uncles and cousins and everybody still live on these actual farms. They're farming. We have a family farm that some of my aunts and uncles and cousins still live on. They raise cattle and beans. And to start in farming with zero means that you are heavily in debt, that you have nothing, that you are starting from the ground up. They didn't start at zero. They started with a pretty good chunk of wealth already.
Choosing this lifestyle. And, Daniel's dad is a very successful businessman, but he never has and never hasn't ever supported us financially, nor did any of his children. Both of our.
This is really important that Hannah says this right here, because there is so much speculation about whether or not David Neeleman helped invest in Ballerina Farm, whether he helps fund it or not. And again, the privilege blindness. So maybe he didn't invest in the farm, but you don't grow up in a house like that without having access to leadership and personal development and being parented in that giant mansion with the sports and the extracurriculars and all of those different things that are in and of themselves privilege. We can just assume his dad paid for his education so that he didn't have to leave with a bunch of student loans. I don't know anybody who has money that would leave their kids with student debt. The fact that Daniel very likely didn't have student debt, that's privilege. The fact that Hannah didn't have student debt, that's privilege. And I frankly just don't believe this. I don't believe that maybe David didn't like write out a check at Christmas time and say, you know, Merry Christmas, go buy yourself something, and they buy themselves a fancy stove. I don't know. That's just pure speculation. But whether or not he has helped financially in any way, giving Daniel that startup job with a $460,000 published salary that allowed them to accumulate the wealth to buy themselves as young newlyweds a $2.97 million house. That is incredible privilege. That privilege has translated into success amongst every member of both families. Every one of Hannah Wright's siblings is intensely wealthy. She plays off her childhood like my parents were just poor florists. And again, that privileged blindness, I'm sure that she thinks that, but a poor florist doesn't go to Juilliard. A poor florist doesn't take her whole entire family on vacation in Maui like Sherry Wright after the passing of her husband. Every one of Daniel's siblings is immensely wealthy. Hannah has a line of cowboy boots by Cecilia of New York. That is one of Daniel's sisters. The whole entire family is privileged. Daniel's cousin, Zach Williams, the NFL football player, his mom, Lisa, is David Neeleman's sister. The whole entire family has used their foundational privilege to accumulate more wealth and become even more successful than the original generations.
Parents taught their children how to work, and the love of work and the love of creation. And so
nobody works harder than my poor friends. Nobody worked harder than me. Nobody works harder than my poor friends. After my divorce, when I was homeless and then moved into my uncle's guest house and was flipping furniture, I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I would sand and refinish a dining table until I collapsed at like 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And I was doing that 7 days a week. And I am still working 7 days a week on my social media platforms because I no longer have access to that privilege.
Daniel had a job at the beginning days of our farming career that he kept. He worked remote online. And then at 6 p.m. when he would get done, we would like start doing farm chores, and we just started sharing.
It is interesting that she just glosses over that. Daniel worked for his dad. He made a shit ton of money.
Sharing this online. And it just, it grew and it grew. And what I shared in those beginning days was just everything. I shared how we were building things, the hardships, the ups and downs. And then when we first started putting products online, they would move because people were, I feel like, connected to us in a way that was honest and truthful and really beautiful. And we were kind of.
So I was connected to Hannah Neeleman because I was connecting to the lies that she was selling people. When I first started watching Ballerina Farm, I thought that she was this little farm girl. I was projecting all of my farming family they're always cash poor. They may be land rich, they're rich in dirt, they're cash poor. I don't have a single actual farmer in my life who ever has money to do anything until eventually they retire and sell the farm and then buy themselves like a cute house in the suburbs and go on a cruise. My farming friends and family are constantly broke. And so I was projecting that onto this little family that I was seeing on my screen. Now, I was so poor. I was going through my divorce and stuff during the pandemic. So I didn't ever have money to buy any of her products. But one Christmas, I put her sourdough starter kit with like the little Witta sourdough start. And she had this beautiful basket and a big jar. I put it into my shopping cart in Ballerina Farm. And I was like, this is what I want for Christmas. I just want the Ballerina Farm kit. And one of the reasons why I wanted that is that I wanted to support another woman who was trying to just make it. I connected to her because I thought that she was this poor little South Dakota farmer. So then one day, me and Kevin, the kids, are on vacation in my rich Mormon architect uncle's vacation property just outside of Park City, Utah. I sent a video to my friend and she's like, oh, you know that Hannah lives right here, right? Like you could drive to Ballerina Farm. And I was pissed. I was like, no, I think you're wrong. She lives in South Dakota. They're from South Dakota. And my bestie's like, oh, no, you can drive over there. So I Googled it. I drove to Ballerina Farm. And here's what I'll tell you. Ballerina Farm is in the most expensive zip code in Utah. It's just outside of Park City with world-class skiing. It's just over the hill from Midway and Interlochen, and it's just like a 30-minute drive from Salt Lake City, which has world-class everything. This right here is a big part of why people are so furious with Ballerina Farm, because in the beginning, we all bought into the fact that she was just one of us, that they were this cute little farming family that was heavily in debt, that had this big old mortgage, that they were barely scraping by, and we wanted to buy her products to support her.
I was shocked at the customers that were coming really from all over the US and buying our pork. That's what we first started offering, is pork. And as the account has grown, it's kind of tricky to navigate as new people come in and new eyes come in, and to kind of make these assumptions, because I'm not able to share every little detail now, because there are a lot of eyes on us, and I have a lot of beautiful, precious children that are in the mix too, and our family and our marriage. And so it's like, how much do I share with, feels like, the whole world? But there's been a few things that it's like, they're not really homesteaders. This is all a fake facade. And it's like, oh, if you could just, and I mean, I'm the first one to say that we are definitely newbies in agriculture. So there's a lot of mistakes that we have made along the way. I mean, it's crazy to see how much we've learned from day one to now. And yeah, it's like the croissants that we share or sell.
Okay, we're going to go into the croissants here. So in one breath, she's like, people are saying they were not really homesteaders. And then, like, the croissants that we sell. Again, I come from a huge farming family. Kevin was a farmer until he became a school teacher. I know farmers like the back of my hand, right? And none of my farm friends sell croissants. None of them, zero of them. They sell the stuff that they grow on their farm. She is not, in fact, just a homesteader. Homesteaders don't have audiences.
On the website, obviously we sell them in retail, but we first started shipping them out. And they are an expensive product. And it's not because we're upping the price because we have an audience online. It's because Chef Ben hand makes every single one in his little kitchen here locally.
Okay, when I saw the Ballerina Farm croissants in the beginning, I thought this was maybe like Hannah's grandma's recipe, and that like there was something special related to Hannah, that she was selling products. You guys know that I go to farmers markets all the time, and actual real life people who just have a passion for baking run little cottage bakeries out of their houses. I thought that Hannah was a cottage baker. Now, I did think that maybe she had people that came in and helped. She had some assistants that were helping, but who's Chef Ben?
And he takes really intense pride in these croissants that he makes, and then we buy them from him, and then we put them in a box with dry ice. And to ship that box, these are not our shipping costs. This is just what the mail carriers charge us. Oftentimes it's more than that. To get something overnight, it just costs money. And so that's what we charge on the website is for handmade croissants and shipping that goes overnight. A lot of comments have been coming in about this scalloped cutting board, saying that it is expensive, and it is. And
this cutting board is why Hannah's doing this whole entire video. They have had so much pushback, so much backlash from this $250 something, over $300 to order this scalloped cutting board. Now watch Hannah try to emotionally manipulate us here. She's going to tell this story of this sweet little mom that comes over and gives her this cutting board that they hand make. Keep in mind, I vacation in this area right here. It is the most expensive zip code in all of Utah. So she's telling this story here. And I know that as viewers across the world try to relate to this, you're going to picture your next door neighbor or yourself, right? Just some little mom living in, like, I live in an 800 square foot apartment. I have a little single mom upstairs from me. She lives in maybe a 600 square foot apartment. Hers is a little bit smaller than mine. She just has the 2-bedroom. we are going to picture normal people, that this woman who brought her this cutting board is a normal person. No, these are Park City rich people. Her neighbor has privilege that the rest of the world doesn't have. So keep that in mind as she tells you about the woman who makes the cutting boards.
I actually got this board a few years ago. I think it was 3 years ago. A local mom dropped it off, and she was like, my husband and I make these, and we hand make them, and I wanted you to have it. And she was honestly one of the most genuine people I had ever met, and she's actually a good friend of mine now. But she came up to me this summer with tears in her eyes, and she was like, I cannot believe that you're selling these cutting boards at the rate that you are, because
okay, and this right here is where the privilege leads to detachment. This is such a let them eat cake moment. This right here shows that people with privilege don't realize how the rest of us live. Everyone's furious about the price of the cutting board. And she's saying, the woman is telling her that, wow, the price that you're selling these cutting boards at, and then listen, their lives are completely changed now. They're making a fortune off of these cutting boards because Hannah is selling boutique products while dressed in these ripped up prairie dresses that make us think that she grew up in a trailer. And she didn't.
it's really changed the dynamic of our family and our family business, and to see them grow in a way that's so beautiful. They're still making each of these by hand here locally. Then we buy them from them and we ship it out. It's a heavy cutting board, so obviously shipping is going to be what it is. We never upcharge on shipping.
Cool. So not only is Hannah getting rich, but all of her friends are getting rich off of us.
And so I just think there's a lot of products, same with our protein powder, where Daniel and I and the team are in the.
How many farmers sell protein powder? And it says farmer protein powder and farmer electrolytes and farmer hydration. This is just agritourism. This is agri-influencing. It's not farming. And the fact that she has an audience that she can sell to is privilege on top of privilege that makes her not understand even why people are mad at her.
These product development meetings, like, oh, we have built an audience over the last 8 years.
Farmers don't have audiences
that trust us and have watched us grow, and it wouldn't be exciting or fun or fulfilling to me to cut corners on things and sell them at a lower price. Because
when I was living my privileged Mormon tradwife life, I never looked at price tags. I just went into a store. I want that sweater. I bought the sweater. My husband paid for the sweater. I never looked at prices. I didn't care about affordability. Hannah lives in this little bubble of privileged people. They're vacationing every weekend, skiing the slopes out of Grandpa David Neeleman's 40,000 square foot house, where he has not only just an incredible master suite, but 10 guest suites, so that each one of his kids, Hannah and Daniel, have their own guest suite that they get to take all of their kids, and all of the skis and everything are there for all of the grandkids. Hannah is so surrounded by wealth that she is not thinking of affordability. She's thinking of profitability, just like every other privileged person is. But the reason why people are so mad at Hannah not caring about affordability is that she looks like the type of girl that would. She looks like she would know what it means to pinch pennies. She looks like she would know what it means to have a family budget. And I guarantee you, she does not.
They'd move quicker. And so there's a lot of decisions we make in the business that really ensure quality in our products. But in the same breath, it's also like we're building a business and jumping into a lot of new things with a lot of eyes on us. Retail, for instance, we opened up our first little store in Utah.
The way that she says that first little store, the way that she glosses over that right there is so deceptive, and it's so scammy to me. And it shows her privileged blindness, because to her, that may be a little store. It's just a little store. She opened up on the Strip in Midway. I go there all the time. Some of my favorite restaurants when we vacation in Park City are on the Strip there in Midway. The real estate there is really expensive. It cost a lot of money for them to open up the Ballerina Farm store. And let's talk about the months that they spent over in Ireland at Ballymonroe Cookery School learning culinary arts so that they could open the store. How many farmers do you know that can just take off and leave their farm and pay all of the people to run everything and take care of everything while you were away for months? They registered their kids in school in Ireland. They took all 8 kids. They took grandma and a couple of Hannah's nieces to do all of the childcare and the cooking and the cleaning up the house and things like that while they were at school all day. They rented a gorgeous home, and then they spent their weekends staying in castles. We see them eating all kinds of fancy food. One thing that just absolutely cracked me up was that when they got to Ireland, we didn't see the cowboy hat, and we didn't see the Little House on the Prairie dresses anymore. All of a sudden, we see this time period where Hannah's posting pictures and these gorgeous, extremely expensive wool trench coats and sweaters and trousers and penny loafers. And she went to Ireland to go to cookery school, dropped a ton of money just for their family to get over there and do all of that. And then also had a complete Ireland-themed wardrobe for herself and Daniel and all of the kids. Kevin's taking me away for Thanksgiving next week because my Mormon family doesn't invite me over. So Kevin and I are always on our own for Thanksgiving. We're going to go away. I'm splurging and going up to Phoenix on a little sabbatical. And I'm not going to buy a new pair of socks. I can't afford to. I can't afford the 3 nights in a hotel and to buy a whole new wardrobe for vacation. You guys tell me in the comments, do you buy a whole new wardrobe to fit the aesthetics on vacation?
Spring, which just has so many bumps. Like there's so many things that need to be figured out. How do we run a kitchen with lots of foot traffic? Like there's things that we're just learning. And I think people expect us to have all of this figured out because we have a lot of followers. And so it's just been interesting to navigate the last few months of like, how do I navigate being a mother, a business owner?
And there, she said it right there. Hannah has presented herself as this trad wife. She's talked about doing whatever her husband wants to do. We had this big story, Hannah Neeleman, queen of the trad wives, written by Megan Agnew in the Times. Hannah's not a trad wife. She's a business owner. Hannah Neeleman is a feminist. She's selling feminism. She's selling a very non-traditional lifestyle. And I want everyone to note that if you're a little MAGA mommy, if you're still personally clinging to traditional family as your ideal, all of y'all who went out and bought that copy of Evie magazine with her on the, because Hannah is trad wife goals. She's not. That's bullshit. She's a business owner.
Growing and sharing all at the same time has just been a tricky last little bit where I'm kind of like, how much do I share? What do I share? What's meaningful content?
She doesn't care about meaningful content. She cares about not getting backlash and not getting critiqued by people. And to do that, you have to be honest about things. And she truly doesn't understand how anything is landing on regular people. She has no idea. She has zero idea why that cutting board blew people up. She has zero idea why the $200 box of meats makes people's brains explode. She has no clue. And by the way, their meats don't come from their farm. Some of their meat is theirs. The Ballerina Farm meat is not Ballerina Farm meat. These are not farmers. This is a boutique agribusiness.
Anyways, that's my thoughts for tonight.
Anyway, I do understand exactly where she's coming from because I had that privilege blindness too. I remember inviting some friends to fly with us to New York for the weekend because I just wanted to go see some guest that was going to be on the David Letterman show. And my friends were like, what are you talking about? We can't just fly to New York for the weekend. Like, we had really cheap plane tickets. I couldn't comprehend that my friends couldn't just pay for those plane tickets. I remember at Thanksgiving one year with all of my sister-in-laws and brother-in-laws who were just normal people who didn't have the income that me and Jake did, one of my sister-in-laws asking me where I got my jeans from. She's like, "Those are so cute." I think they were like $400 jeans. And I was like, "Oh, I got them at Nordstrom. My personal shopper thought they'd be really cute on me for Thanksgiving." And my sister-in-laws just gasped. They were like, "What the hell were you talking about?" But that didn't seem like a lot of money to me. During the family talent show at our Thanksgiving getaway to the beach, which in and of itself was super privileged, my cell phone rang and I had to have a little conversation over in the corner with my housekeepers because I had changed the code on our keypad to our garage so they couldn't get in. And so I had to give them the code. And then I gave them instructions. Can you make sure that you strip all of the sheets, make sure that the main side by side gets cleaned out? Because we were away on vacation, I was having my crew of housekeepers come in and get everything all polished and spiffed up because I had left it a little bit messy when we left. And my sister-in-laws, who were all just normal people, thought that I was batshit crazy. They were all like, "Oh, okay, well, we're just going home to like our little apartments with like stuff everywhere. And we probably didn't like run the dishwasher, take the trash out. So we're going to walk into like stinky apartments a week from now." And Jenny has her crew of housekeepers. But inside of my gated enclave full of multi-million-dollar homes, 100% of all of my friends had housekeepers and nannies and personal assistants and personal shoppers. And it was completely normal to go to Banana Republic every 6 months and have your stylist outfit you so that you had the most current things. And I didn't know that that was weird until I lost that all. That privilege blindness kept me from seeing the world like normal people, and that is exactly what is going on with Hannah Neeleman. She didn't even grow up like going to public school or anything. The only real people that she sees are people in her Mormon ward on Sundays. And again, like as real as they are, it's still the most expensive zip code in Utah and one of the most expensive in the whole West Coast, one of the most expensive in the entire West Coast. She's in a bubble. So she's trying to figure out what type of content doesn't get her hate. My advice to Hannah is to get off that farm and get out in the real world and see how real people live. Bernie Sanders says that there's two Americas. There's the America for the upper 1% and the America of the working class. And Hannah never sees that America. If you go to her TikTok, she only follows one person. She's surrounded herself by other privileged people who do not reflect any sort of reality. So her detachment from her audience reflects that. You guys tell me often that I'm real and authentic and relatable. I didn't used to be. My life crashing and burning to the ground and all of the horrible, hard things that I've gone through, I was forced to eat humble pie. I went from riches to rags overnight. Those last 7 years of living in poverty that made me relate to other people, helped me empathize. So maybe Hannah, instead of spending your weekends skiing the slopes of Park City in Grandpa Neeleman's 40,000 square foot ski in, ski out house, maybe you find like the crappiest Airbnb in Ogden and go see what it's like to be real people. You guys, this divide between rich and poor is getting worse and worse. It's not getting any better. Anyway, I'll be hanging out in the comments. Love to hear what you guys think. Have a great day.